Today I'm breaking down 10 players everyone is wrong about in 2025. These are the guys that are either flying way too high or being criminally slept on, and I'm here to set the record straight. Kicking it off with spicy Brock Bowers at pick 16. And listen, I get it. Bowers was a beast last year. He averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game. That was third best among all tight ends. But here's the truth bomb. When you compare him to all running backs and wide receivers, he was only 34th in points per game. And in most leagues where you need at least 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and usually a flex, you're passing on elite wideouts and running backs for a tight end who has to be elite to justify this pick. I'm old enough to remember when Rob Gronkowski would be a first, second round pick in fantasy, and that almost never worked out. I'm old enough to remember when Travis Kelce had that monster year. The year nobody drafted him in the first or second round, and then started drafting him in the first and second round after that, and it rarely worked out. I have a feeling it's not going to work out for Brock Bowers either. Sure, he'll be fine, but you're passing on studs like Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Drake London, just to get a tight end that you can feel good about at a position that really doesn't matter in fantasy all that much. Next up, Josh Jacobs at pick 24, and this is a steal. This is absolutely too low. Last year, he ranked 8th in weighted opportunities, 6th in carries, and 5th in red zone attempts. He's a clear workhorse running back for an elite offense that loves to run the ball inside the 10-yard line. And this offense doesn't have any real red zone receiving threats, so they continually give the ball to Josh Jacobs. But what I really love about Josh Jacobs' ADP this year is you can get an elite wide receiver like Jamar Chase in round 1, and then when it comes back to you at the 2-3 turn, you can get another elite wide receiver and still get Josh Jacobs as your RB1, a workhorse RB1 that you can still feel good about while stacking elite wide receivers. Moving on, and look, T. Higgins literally won people championships in week 17 last year. That's fresh in everyone's minds. But let's not get carried away here. When you look at T. Higgins, his best season is still only 75 catches and 1,042 yards. Now, sure, if he hadn't missed a few games last year, he would have surpassed that, but it's not like this guy is an elite alpha wide receiver. Not to mention, last year was a borderline historic year for the Bengals offense. You got to think at least some regression is coming. Not to mention, Jamar Chase is a bona fide elite alpha wide receiver who is going to command way more of the targets and the opportunities here. Higgins is one of those guys that always seems to be swinging back and forth. Either people hate drafting this guy or they love drafting this guy. Well, after last year's season, it seems like everybody loves drafting this guy again, and that's usually when T. Higgins becomes a trap in fantasy drafts. I'm not doing it if I can avoid it. I think there's just other wide receivers or even running backs I'd rather have in this range. And then there's his teammate, Chase freaking Brown. From week 9 on last year, he played over 80% of the snaps in every single game. No running back does that. He was also 2nd in targets among running backs over that span, 7th in red zone attempts over that span, and he finished 4th in points per game behind only Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs. And going into the season, he's obviously the clear lead back because the Bengals did nothing at running back other than draft Taj Brooks in the 6th round. Last year, Chase Brown was an absolute late-round league winner, but I think even this year he can be a third-round league winner because that's where he's going, and that is way too low for Chase Brown this year. He's an unquestioned bell cow running back in one of the best offenses with a quarterback who's not afraid to check it down when he needs to. I don't understand why Chase Brown is going this low, but when Chase Brown is there in the 3rd round, you got to hit that draft button, smash that draft button. Now look, I wasn't really in on Davante Adams last year, and he's certainly not the wide receiver 1 cheat code he once was, but don't sleep on him at pick 31. He's now in that Cooper Kupp role in a Sean McVay offense with a healthy Matthew Stafford. And last year, the Rams basically gave up on Kupp. He had only 17 targets over the final 5 games. That role now belongs to Davante Adams, and they're going to target him way more than they targeted Cooper Kupp. Adams showed, even with the Jets last year, no, he's not an elite alpha wide receiver anymore, but you put him in that slot role, he could still be a highly productive, potentially a top 10 wide receiver. And now you stick him in the Sean McVay offense with a healthy Matthew Stafford. There's still plenty of upside potential for Davante Adams this year, and I think he's an absolute steal in fantasy drafts. Then there's 3 things you can count on in life: death, taxes, and Mike Evans going in the 3rd round of fantasy drafts and getting 1,000 yards and 10 plus touchdowns. He missed 3 games last year and still went over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. That's now 10 straight seasons every year he's been in the league of over 1,000 yards, and he's hit double-digit touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 seasons. And when you look at the Bucs, they didn't do much on defense. This should still be one of the worst defenses, so expect plenty of shootouts in 2025 once again. Mike Evans plus Baker Mayfield has been fantasy gold the last couple of years, and I don't think that's going to change in 2025. So when you have a pick late in the third round and Mike Evans is still on the board, just thank your league mates for letting him drop to you here. This guy is locked in 1,000 yards, 10 plus touchdowns, and probably a top 10 wide receiver once again in fantasy this year. And hey, I know this is a football channel, but the NBA Finals start this week, and if you want to take advantage of it and get some action in the finals, you got to check Underdog Fantasy and their extender. With the extender, you can play your way to increasingly bigger boosts each game of the finals. Start the finals by using your Game 1 boost and continue boosting each subsequent game to unlock the next one. The longer the series goes, the bigger the boost. You're going to want to see how serious it gets when that Game 7 hits. Hop on Underdog, the best place to make picks during playoff basketball, and get started right now. And when you do, make sure you sign up using promo code ENDGAME, because that'll get you a free pick that you can use on that Game 1 boost, and not to mention up to $1,000 of bonus cash. Now let's move on to DK Metcalf, pick 48, and this is too high. DK Metcalf feels like he might be the most overrated player in all of fantasy football. He hasn't hit 15 points per game in 4 straight years, and that includes seasons playing with Russell Wilson, Geno Smith. Now we're talking about Mason Rudolph or a potentially washed up Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Oh, and let's not forget the elephant in the room. He's in an Arthur Smith offense. You're spending the top 50 pick on a guy who's been wide receiver 24 or worse for 4 straight years. What are we even doing here? People just see the name DK Metcalf and they can't help themselves. They envision upside, they envision league winning, but really, this guy is just kind of okay all season long and is one of those picks you kind of forget you even made by the time it's over. Now, I've already talked about a couple Bengals, but let's talk about Joe Burrow. Threw for almost 5,000 yards last year and 43 touchdowns. That's insane, but I still think he's being drafted way too high at pick 54. When we look at the elite quarterbacks here, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, they all run or get you significant rushing touchdowns. He doesn't do that. You're getting maybe 200 rushing yards and a handful of goal line sneaks. If those passing numbers drop, and they almost certainly will, he doesn't have the rushing upside to stay elite in fantasy football. And when you can wait 30, 40, 50 picks later and still get guys like Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Bo Nix, etc., you're just wasting draft capital here. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Joe Burrow is going to be fine this year. He's an elite quarterback. He's going to put up good numbers. But if those numbers significantly drop from last year, you're going to wish you hadn't picked them this early in fantasy drafts. Now, a guy I'm planting my flag on this year is Kenneth Walker, pick 58, and I think that is just too low. New offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak brings that outside zone scheme that is tailor-made for Walker's skill set. Just ask Alvin Kamara, who had his highest explosive run rating in 4 years under Clint Kubiak. Not only that, new head coach Mike McDaniel wants to run the rock badly. He already fired first-year offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb after 1 year because he didn't commit to the run enough. Walker's always had the talent. Maybe this is the system that finally unlocks it. And look, I'll be honest. I feel like Walker is kind of going down that DK Metcalf road. A guy we always expect to be great, but doesn't really do it. But I'm buying into him this year under this Clint Kubiak running scheme. And then finally, let's end with Alvin Kamara at pick 61, which just seems criminal to me. This guy has been top 2 in running back targets each of the last 2 years. He's been top 5 in points per game despite being bad on the ground the last 2 years. Kendre Miller and Devin Neal, I'm not worried about these guys taking significant touches from Alvin Kamara. Taysom Hill, the guy that always vultured touchdowns from him, he's probably not even going to play in 2025. And whoever the quarterback is, Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, they will check it down to Kamara over and over again. Alvin Kamara, once again, will probably be one of the leaders in targets and receptions among running backs. And even with poor running back efficiency, which he's had each of the last 4 years, it won't matter. And this guy will put up likely top 15, top 10 numbers. And once again, he's a value in fantasy drafts. So those are the 10 players either going too high or too low in fantasy drafts that you need to know about for 2025. But there's way more you need to know about if you're going to crush your draft. And we got you covered in our 2025 playlist right here.